8 years ago, Hello Neighbor looked like it was about to become one of the biggest horror games on YouTube. A mysterious house, a creepy neighbor, secrets everywhere. It had everything. But somewhere along the way, things changed. Today we're going back 8 years to figure out what went wrong with Hello Neighbor, and how a dream project turned into one of gaming's biggest missed opportunities. Hello Neighbor began as a simple idea, a stealth horror game where the AI actually learns from your moves. Every playthrough felt different. Every door, window, and shadow was a chance to outsmart the neighbor, or get caught. It wasn't about cheap scares, it was about tension, mystery, and curiosity. And that's what made it unique. When Hello Neighbor launched, it exploded. YouTubers and streamers went crazy over the neighbor, the house, and the hidden secrets. Fans analyzed every glitch, created theories, and built mini games inspired by the neighbor. For a moment, it felt like Hello Neighbor just wasn't a game. It was a phenomenon. Fans had sky-high expectations. The early hype made it seem like the game could be the next big horror franchise. The community was building lore, dissecting every alpha, and waiting eagerly for updates. But everything went downhill afterwards. Updates slowed, the story became inconsistent, and some of the features fans loved were changed or removed. The AI that made the game special started to feel predictable, and the early excitement began to fade. When the full game released, Hello Neighbor got its hype again, but not for long. Act 1 opens by dropping us into a quiet suburban neighborhood. A kid playing alone in the street, sunlight, nothing out of the ordinary. Until everything changes. A scream from inside the neighbor's house shatters the silence. The camera zooms in, the music shifts, and suddenly, we aren't just watching a scene. We're witnessing something we were never meant to see. Through the window, someone is being dragged away. No dialogue. No explanation, just a door slams shut, sealing a secret behind the walls. This is where Hello Neighbor hooked people instantly. Not with jump scares, but with questions. The game doesn't give you answers. Instead, it gives you something stronger. A reason to break into the house. From here, this is where the players drop straight into the world. No tutorial, no on-screen instructions, just the realization that whatever is happening inside, we need to find out. Approaching the neighbor's house, the environment itself tells a story. Toys scattered in the yard, doors nailed shut, strange construction everywhere, and that uneasy feeling that the house has been remodeled to protect something. It doesn't feel like a home. It feels like a fortress. And this is where the early magic of Hello Neighbor came from. The game trusted players to be curious. It didn't explain what to do. It made you want to figure it out. Then comes the feature that blew people away. The neighbor's AI. Break a window, he fixes it. Sneak in the back too many times, he sets traps. The game responded to your failures, something almost no other indie horror game was doing at the time. And in these early moments, it worked. Players felt hunted, pressured, and challenged in a new way that felt personal. This was the version of Hello Neighbor that had everyone excited. The potential was massive. To get inside and make progress, the game expected players to experiment, push buttons, stack objects, climb, test ideas, without guidance. For some, that was amazing. But for others, it quickly became confusing. The game didn't always communicate what it wanted, and when players got stuck, the AI went from brilliant to frustrating. The systems were ambitious, maybe too ambitious for the structure surrounding them. Finally, after sneaking past the neighbor and solving Act 1, you reach the basement door. The moment everyone was waiting for. This is where the hype peaked. The basement wasn't just the next level. It was the payoff for hours of community theory and speculation. Players expected answers, a big reveal, something big. And then, The basement didn't explain anything. It only made things stranger. Narratively, that should have been fine. It kept the mystery alive. But this is where Hello Neighbor may have created its biggest problem. The atmosphere, the mystery, the silence, the AI. Everything in Act 1 convinced players that something deeper was coming. Act 1 showed what Hello Neighbor could have been. And that's one of the reasons the disappointment later hit so hard. The ideas were incredible, but the execution wasn't ready. Early versions of Hello Neighbor made the basement feel dangerous, unpredictable, alive. But in the final game, players walked through it and thought, wait, that's it? The atmosphere was there, the potential was there, but the design didn't match the build-up Act 1 spent so long creating. And this disconnect between what players expected and what the game actually could have delivered became one of Hello Neighbor's reoccurring problems. The basement wasn't bad, it just wasn't enough. It didn't answer questions, it didn't push the story forward, and instead of elevating the mystery, it highlighted how much content had changed or been cut since the early builds. The basement is the real moment where Hello Neighbor's vision and reality started to drift apart. Act 1 ends with failure, and Act 2 should have been the moment where everything got darker, deeper, and more intense. Instead, this is where the cracks start showing. When we wake up in the basement, we're in the place we've been trying to get in since the start of the game. But instead of answers, instead of a reveal, players are immediately thrown into confusion. The basement should have been the darkest, most grounded moment in the game. Instead, things immediately felt different, and not in a good way. Rooms stopped looking like real spaces, hallways start feeling abstract, and the environment stops telling a story. Instead of uncovering what was wrong with Hello Neighbor, players were now trying to figure out, what is this level even asking me to do? This game wasn't building mystery anymore. It was creating friction. Act 1 worked because the object was clear. Break in, avoid the neighbor, and breach the basement. Act 2 doesn't communicate anything. No direction, no sense of what the players should be trying to accomplish. Players weren't solving puzzles. They were trying to reverse engineer the developer's thought process. And that's where the frustration started taking over. In Act 1, the AI was unpredictable in the best way. It hunted you, reacted to your choices, and kept tension high. But in Act 2, that same AI became overwhelming. The new space wasn't built for the neighbor to navigate. So instead of tense chases, players experienced constant interruptions, random captures, the neighbor throwing traps everywhere, trying the same puzzle again and again while going nowhere. The fear was gone. Players didn't feel hunted anymore. They felt annoyed. Act 1 built a burning question. What's happening in this house? Act 2 should have answered something. Even a small clue. Instead, almost nothing is revealed. No new information, no new context, no deeper understanding of the neighbor or the situation. The mystery didn't evolve, it just expanded. And when mystery expands without answers, players stop feeling interested and start feeling disconnected. Act 2 wasn't just challenging. It was the moment players first realized the game didn't know how to balance its ideas. The horror atmosphere vanished, the story stopped progressing, the AI became a problem instead of a feature, and the puzzles felt like obstacles, not storytelling. Act 1 showed potential. Act 2 is where the experiences started slipping out of control. This is where the audience began thinking, something is going wrong with this game, and it might only get worse from here. Act 3 should have been the moment Hello Neighbor came together. This is the part of the game where all the weirdness, all the mystery, all the build-up should have led to a payoff. Instead, Act 3 is where the experience fully loses control, where the excitement from Act 1 is officially replaced with confusion, frustration, and disappointment. Act 3 throws the player into a massive version of the neighbor's house, towering surreal, impossible, and visually striking floors. The scale is impressive, but scale alone isn't design, because once again, the player is left asking, what am I actually supposed to do? There's no clear direction, no strong object, and no narrative support to explain why the house suddenly looks like a child's fever dream. It's creative, but creativity without structure becomes noise. Act 3 was filled with ideas, but with very little purpose. By now, the design philosophy had turned fully abstract. Act 3 introduces physics-based puzzles, switch puzzles, dream sequences, metaphorical spaces, hidden triggers, and extremely specific object interactions. It wasn't that these ideas were bad. They were just missing the thing Act 1 understood. Why am I climbing this giant fortress inside of a living room? Why does the key progress come from a shopping spree minigame? In Act 1, the puzzles made sense because the environment told a grounded story. In Act 3, players weren't solving mysteries. They were solving developer logic. That's where the emotional thread snapped. Hello Neighbor was sold on the idea of the neighbor learns, the neighbor adapts, the neighbor becomes smarter the more you play. By Act 3, that dream collapses. The AI simply wasn't built to handle a level of this size and complexity. So instead of meaningful encounters, the neighbor gets stuck, the neighbor teleports, or the neighbor wanders aimlessly. Or worse, he shows up constantly without giving the player time to experiment. In Act 1, the AI felt alive. In Act 3, the AI felt broken. And when your flagship feature fails, the whole product suffers. Players came into Act 3 still wanting answers. What is the neighbor hiding? What happened to the family? Why is the protagonist trapped in nightmares? But Act 3 doesn't move the narrative forward. Instead, the surrealism ramps up. Rooms float, physics break, and reality bends. Players didn't feel like they were uncovering the truth. They felt like the narrative was stealing. The mystery became too abstract to hold on to. By the time most players reached Act 3, reviews and reactions has shifted. What started as a psychological stealth horror was now a confusing puzzle platformer with no answers. And that's the tragedy. There were brilliant ideas here. A childlike perspective, trauma represented through dream logic, symbolism hidden in the environment. But for many players, these concepts were never explained well enough to land. The game asked the audience to understand a story that the game itself wasn't clearly telling. The scariest part of Act 1 was simple. Break in and avoid the neighbor. Players weren't scared anymore. They were tired. Act 3 exposed the central problem with Hello Neighbor. The ambition was massive, but the foundation wasn't strong enough to support it. The puzzles became too abstract, the narrative stopped communicating, the AI didn't work in bigger levels, the world grew stranger without providing answers, and the emotional momentum from Act 1 was lost. Hello Neighbor stopped being a horror experience you felt, and became a puzzle experience you endured. This is where many players finally realized the incredible promise shown in Act 1 wasn't going to be fulfilled. Act 3 wasn't just a turning point. It was a moment the audience understood. This game had gone off the rails, and it wasn't coming back. After Act 3, one thing became impossible to ignore. Hello Neighbor's biggest enemy wasn't the neighbor. It was its own puzzles. Act 1 had the perfect balance. Logical solutions, environmental clues, a clear goal, and the pressure of the neighbor hunting you. Players felt smart when they solved something. But the deeper the game went, the more that design philosophy disappeared. By Act 3, puzzles became things players didn't solve with logic. They solved them with trial, error, frustration, and YouTube tutorials. Hello Neighbor didn't just become difficult, it became cryptic. Keys and items were tucked into obscure places with no hint they existed, let alone where they were needed. Players would walk past the solution dozens of times with no idea they ever missed anything. A puzzle isn't satisfying if the game never tells you what you're looking for, why you need it, or how it connects to the objective. Hello Neighbor expected players to think like the developers, not like players. Instead of feeling like a horror investigation, Act 3 became a house-sized checklist of developer guesses. It didn't matter if the solutions made sense. It only mattered that you stumbled into it. In Act 1, the AI elevated the experience. In later acts, the AI made puzzles almost impossible to focus on. Imagine this. You're trying to figure out a complex sequence of objects in a massive room, and the neighbor grabs you every 15 seconds. You aren't scared anymore. You're annoyed. Good puzzle games introduce mechanics at one time. Use it, understand it, master it, then move on. Hello Neighbor didn't do that. Instead, it dumped physics, platforming, key hunts, environmental switches, hidden objects, unmarked interactables, metaphorical dream puzzles, and stealth. There is no shortcuts, no ramps, and no learning curves. Just chaos. And here's where the real damage happened. The puzzles didn't just frustrate players. They drowned out the story. When a player is stuck for 30 minutes trying to figure out, where's the item I didn't know existed? They stop thinking about the neighbor, the mystery, the world, and the narrative. The emotional experience collapsed because the mechanical experience came first. If the player isn't progressing psychologically, they aren't progressing narratively. Hello Neighbor thought difficulty and obscurity would make the mystery feel deeper. Instead, it made the gameplay feel aimless, repetitive, exhausting, and disconnected. At some point, the player stopped asking, "What's in the basement?" and started asking, "When does this end?" The game forgot something simple. A puzzle isn't just a challenge. It's a conversation between the designer and the player. And Hello Neighbor wasn't talking anymore. It was whispering solutions into walls and hoping you would find them by accident. On top of Act 3 having impossible puzzles and glitches around every corner, Act 3 is the exact same level we play in some of the alphas and betas. And that's just another reason players didn't bother to finish the game. This was supposed to be it. After hours of sneaking, experimenting, glitching, climbing, falling, retrying, you finally reached the finale of Hello Neighbor. The moment everyone expected the game to finally answer questions it had been teasing since Alpha 1. But instead of clarity, instead of a payoff, instead of a satisfying conclusion, this is where Hello Neighbor loses control completely. And this is where everything that went wrong finally hits all at once. Following Act 3's final climb, players step through that last door expecting the truth, the basement explained, the neighbor confronted, something, anything, to tie the story together. But the world that loads in is nothing like what the game built up. The neighborhood is gone, the house is gone, and that feeling that you're being watched was also gone. You're dropped into a massive dream level. It wasn't dark, empty, symbolic, or surreal. It was almost like a completely different game. Players weren't shocked. They were blindsided. Because this isn't the mystery deepening. This was the tone, the setting, and the identity of the game completely changing at the last second. You're suddenly running through giant floating structures while a massive, shadowy version of the neighbor stomps around. The game tries to communicate a metaphor. It wants you to understand about trauma, fear, and childhood. But here's the problem. The game never teaches you the rules. You don't know what your objective is. You don't know how to progress. You don't know why anything works the way it does. Players weren't solving a climax. They were guessing their way through it. The tension of Act 1 was gone. The clever hiding and sneaking was gone. The adaptive AI? Completely irrelevant. The finale abandoned every mechanic the game used to build hype in the first place. One of the key moments in the finale is protecting your younger self from the giant shadow neighbor. On paper, this should have been emotional, powerful, and a payoff. But in reality, players didn't even know who the kid was supposed to be. The game never connects the dots. It doesn't build the relationship, and it never sets up the meaning. So when the game expects the finale to hit with an emotional weight, most players were just standing there thinking, is this the ending? What am I doing? The emotional impact wasn't missing. It was never built in the first place. The biggest problem with the finale is simple. The entire gameplay loop of Hello Neighbor, stealth, hiding, sneaking, experimenting is thrown out completely. Instead, you get abstract platforms, a giant boss who doesn't behave like the AI, symbolism without explanation, and puzzles that barely function. Act 1 and the early alphas built their identity on grounded horror. The finale throws players into a symbolic dream world without preparing them for it. It's not that the idea was bad. It's that it wasn't earned. Players weren't asking for everything to be spelled out. They just wanted something like, Why was the neighbor locking people in the basement? What happened to the family? What's canon? Why is any of this happening? The finale doesn't clarify anything. It creates more question, then ends. Instead of wrapping the mystery together, it dissolves the story into symbolism and leaves the players to guess what any of it meant. After following 3 acts of build-up, after years of alpha hype, theory videos, and speculation, that wasn't good enough. When the final cutscene plays, the shadow fades and the world goes quiet. Players expected a final twist, a return to the real house, a reveal about the neighbor, something to anchor the symbolism back into the story they just lived through. Instead, we wake up from a dream and the credits roll. That's it. Not mysterious, not open-ended, just empty. The finale exposed the core issue behind Hello Neighbor. It had brilliant ideas, massive potential, a world of people that wanted to explore, but no structure, no payoff, no clear direction tying the acts together. Act 1 promised a grounded, AI-driven thriller. Act 2 and 3 drifted into frustration. But the finale showed players the truth. The game didn't know how to end the story it started. And that's the moment the community went from confused but hopeful to, yeah, something seriously went wrong. So after everything, the hype, the theories, the alphas, the mysteries, and the years of excitement building around this game, Hello Neighbor didn't just stumble. It collapsed under its own potential. Because the real problem wasn't the AI. It was the puzzles. And it wasn't the weird dream sequences. It was this. Act 1 set the standard. It created tension, curiosity, and a world that felt alive. A world where you were the intruder, and the neighbor was always one step behind. Players were ready for a full story of fear, discovery, and answers. But the deeper you go, the more the vision drifts. Act 2 and 3 replaced grounded horror with dream logic. The puzzles became frustrating instead of clever. The AI went from impressive to inconsistent. And by the finale, the game barely resembled the thing everyone fell in love with. Hello Neighbor didn't fail because it lacked ideas. It failed because it had too many, and none of them were given the time or structure to fully land. The promise was there. The potential was there. We saw it. The community saw it. The early alphas proved it. But somewhere between the excitement and the final release, the heart of the game got buried under ambition. And that's the real tragedy. Hello Neighbor could have been one of the most unique horror games ever made. A tight, grounded horror game driven by mystery with an AI that learns from you. Instead, it became a symbol of what happens when scope grows faster than direction. The mystery didn't get answered. The story didn't get resolved. And the fear that made Act 1 legendary never returned. The end of Hello Neighbor didn't go wrong because it tried nothing. It went wrong because it tried everything. And that's why people still talk about it. Not as a masterpiece, but it's one of gaming's biggest what could have been moments. And that's what went wrong with Hello Neighbor. Even after a prequel and after a sequel, it still stands as one of gaming's biggest missed opportunities. But it's not all bad. Here in 2025, the game has seen a surprising comeback with the new Hello Neighbor 3 prototype getting attention, and the community exploding thanks to all the Five Nights at Freddy mods. I want to genuinely thank everyone who stuck around to the end. This video took way too long to make, and your support means everything. And hey, consider subscribing. It's free, and it helps a ton. If you want to see more what went wrong videos, drop suggestions in the comments. I'm down to cover anything. And don't worry, more Hello Neighbor content is definitely on the way. If I missed anything or if I got something wrong, tell me in the comments below. I'll pin corrections and add updates if needed. Thank y'all so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and until next time.